In 1996, Capcom's Resident Evil took the world by storm, inspiring fans of the horror genre everywhere. At the same time, its impact inspired others, including Capcom itself, which then started to work on the Onimusha series. Onimusha Warlord started off as a ninja version of Resident Evil, with the idea being that the player would have to traverse a ninja house filled with traps and puzzles. The final product had Onimusha releasing in 2001, proving to be a successful hybrid of Resident Evil's puzzle formula and a hack-and-slash adventure. During the development of Onimusha, a bug occurred which allowed for the player to keep enemies floating in mid-air while they slashed at them, which went on to inspire one of the core gameplay mechanics of Devil May Cry, a game that also started out as a direct result of Resident Evil. But that's another story. This is the story of David Jaffe, the game designer behind the Twisted Metal franchise. When Onimusha Warlords released, Jaffe liked what he saw and decided that he wanted to do the same thing but in a Greek mythology-inspired setting. Along with this key inspiration, Jaffe drew from movies such as Clash of the Titans and Gladiator, and other games like Strider and Ico. The end result eventually led to God of War. Santa Monica Studios was given a hefty budget to pull off this idea, and creative freedom to experiment and stray from traditional mythological stories. At the same time, God of War was designed specifically to be the best version of pre-existing systems. It wasn't meant to break new ground as much as it was to stand atop its contemporaries. Combat was simple but allowed for player freedom above all else. Puzzles were both local and global, fitting pieces of the world together one chamber at a time. And platforming kept things interesting between combat and puzzling, congealing everything together for a cinematic experience. God of War was created as a product of passion, not one out of fear. And while it may have not taken leaps of faith to flesh out a new genre, it was received with near-perfect scores across the board, cementing its place as a stroke of genius that reiterated why people played video games in the first place. I was almost in high school when the first God of War dropped for the PS2 in 2005. As seems to be the tradition for my gaming experience at this point in time, I rented the game, got frustrated at being bad, and returned it. Blockbuster had this thing going where I could rent as many games as I wanted to for like $30 a month, and I took full advantage of that. That said, God of War's Greek mythology-inspired story and design stuck with me through the years, eventually resulting in me picking up a PS3 just to play the entire trilogy in high school. Although the original mainline trilogy and its PSP titles might have been re-released and remastered a few times, I never got back into Kratos' story until the reboot with Norse mythology dropped and quickly became some of my favorite games in recent history. It got me to wondering how the original games compared, and how well they hold up today. So in this video, I'll be taking a look at the original 3 numbered games in the God of War franchise. I'll be analyzing the game's mechanics, story structure, and character development. I know there's a good case for the PSP entries as well, but I wanted to stick with the numbered games for this one video and decide if there's enough interest in God of War on my channel before doing anything else with those. Before I begin, I'll note that I have a sponsorship with NordVPN around the 50-minute mark or so try not to be too alarmed. The first God of War kicks off with the lead singer of Disturbed jumping to his death after a decade of servitude to the gods as their champion. A narrator claims that Kratos had only recently given up hope, leading to the player taking control of the Spartan 3 weeks before he jumped off the highest mountain in Greece. These guys definitely wanted a flashy and eye-catching introduction, one that had you immediately being able to inflict carnage onto your enemies. It's a great intro, though obviously a bit dated now, as you would expect. Your controls are pretty simple, as was intended by the devs. Light and heavy attacks, grabs, double jumping, blocking, and rolling. I think the most interesting bit is the existence of parrying, allowing you to hit your block just as an attack hits to knock enemies back and keep on the offensive. The simplicity is perfect though, as it leads into various combos that you can chain together between grabs, alternating light and heavy attacks, and mid-air techniques. All of this works together in perfect harmony to create cinematic moments that have Kratos smashing enemies into other enemies, ripping monsters apart and sending them into the sky with simple button presses. Occasionally you'll have some quick-time events which were all the rage at the time, but still lead to some fun to look at destruction throughout. I think the biggest issue that I have now is the mashing, but I also knew that these games have quite a lot of mashing to them going in. Basically, as you progress, you'll occasionally have to force something open by mashing a button. The only issue with this, besides the mechanic being rather tiresome, is that the PS4 and 5 controllers have evolved a bit since the PS2, with the R2 button being more of a trigger now than a button. so mashing R2 in particular feels a lot more awkward than it used to, though that isn't really the dev's fault. As you continue pulling enemies apart, you gain experience which you can sink into a variety of upgrades. At this stage though, you can only really improve your blades since that's all you have access to. As you progress through the raging storm that buffets these ships, it becomes clear that you were sent here by the gods to ward off the minions of Ares and theoretically save the sailors here. That said, you can also attack any sailors that are currently running around like chickens with their heads cut off if you so choose. Puzzles are simple for now, involving the likes of crossing thin beams and moving a box to the end of the path without letting it get hit by arrows. It feels really odd to watch this death machine of a man suddenly have to outstretch his arms and maintain his balance on beams of wood or push a crate around and jump on top of it, but a lot of this game is function over style, creating a weird mix of super intense cinematic moments and awkward looking gameplay mechanics. Though I do gotta say that the fact that this HUD disappears when you're not in combat is a super cool feature for an older game. Eventually you get your first power-up, a magic attack from Poseidon, who charges you with defeating the Hydra that's going haywire on these Spartan ships. The attack itself is a small AoE which is centered on Kratos, and uses meter to cast. This helps tremendously with the first boss fight that's actually a lot more like a puzzle. I appreciate what they went for here a lot, as the cutscene beforehand shows some sailors attempting to fight the thing only for one of them to shout out that the main head of the Hydra keeps healing the lesser heads. Yes, it gives away the puzzle, but it's also a bit of a red herring, as the lesser heads prevent you from reaching the main head until they're incapacitated. But simply putting them down causes the main head to heal them up. After a little bit of stalemate, I noticed the glowing pinpoint of the sharp spike positioned directly above the lesser heads, which is pretty effective old school game design. After pinning the two smaller heads down, we can climb up and take on the main event, a cinematic experience that has you ignoring the regenerating health bar and smashing the Hydra against a mast until it splinters and creates another makeshift spike for you to impale the thing on. When everything clicked in this fight, it felt really rewarding to finally take this monster down, which is exactly the feeling that you want from this type of event. It's really smart game design even 18 years later. The aftermath has Kratos revealing the type of wrathful person that he is, as he climbs inside the Hydra's mouth to seemingly rescue the captain of the fleet, only to reveal that he's here for the key around his neck.
Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
I guess that explains why we can wholesale slaughter the other sailors aboard these vessels if we want. It's this mix of edgier old school design where you can beat up pedestrians if you so choose, and a testament to Kratos' morality and lack of empathy. He's here to do what he needs to do, not be a hero of the people directly. Taking the key to the captain's quarters ends the first chapter, and gains Kratos his prize. 2 women who he's here to bang apparently. The things you had to do to get laid in ancient Greece, man. Nah, apparently these 2 were there as a, mini gamer reward, I guess. I mean, you can mash the button prompts as they come up and listen to them compliment your wiener size and shit. It's so fucking mid-2000s gaming. The main thing that Kratos wants though is for his nightmares of his past to stop, which is why he's been in servitude of some of the gods for 10 years now. Athena claims that he's nearly at the stage where he'll be rewarded with forgiveness of his past deeds, but that he needs to perform one final task first, stopping Ares from laying siege to her city. Since Zeus has forbidden the gods from fighting each other, she's using a loophole to have her champion do her dirty work, sending Kratos to Athens. Athens is where the formula for the first game is really spelled out, which creates a fun feedback loop for the player to continuously run through. Basically, your enemies tend to be less cannon fodder and more mini-bosses. You have to get their health low and then execute them for a burst of experience and or health. I mean, I guess you don't really have to execute them, you can just keep hitting them, but, you know. Might as well, right? I can actually see this being kind of annoying with enemies that look very grunt-like, but I think what the devs were going for here is having you feel like you're fighting mythical, inhuman enemies and succeeding constantly. Blocking becomes much more important, as enemies will get the jump on you if your attacks happen to not ward them off, and upgrading your blades becomes a priority. Bigger mini-bosses still rely on QTEs to finish off rather than mashing, making their deaths more satisfying than the grunts which litter the streets of Athens. When you do finally get that first upgrade for your blades, it comes with a host of new moves. These include a couple of aerial and defensive attacks, a dash, and the Rage of the Gods mode which the series has always touted. This mode is basically a huge power spike to your normal moveset in the first game, good for when you're backed into a corner or just want to mow down some tougher enemies fast. Additionally, Aphrodite pops by to help you out also. Except instead of giving you a power like Poseidon did, she goes, "Hey, you see that there Gorgon hanging out with her tits out and shit? Yeah, if you rip her head off, it'll give you a new power." Once that's done, she tells you to use the Gorgon's head to petrify the enemies that pop up in the room, and that if you do that, she'll give you the power to freeze enemies using the Gorgon's head. What? No, bitch, this isn't a power-up from you, this is all me doing this. But whatever, it's definitely a good power-up since it allows you to bypass the execution mashing entirely. Level design-wise, a lot of chambers are relatively cleverly designed in that they consistently tend to have treasure tucked away at different points throughout them if you just turn to look. The issue is that the game's camera isn't something that you can control, so you'll often have to mash Kratos into a corner to check it for extra stuff instead of simply turning the camera that way. It kinda makes sense given the game's key inspiration of Onimusha, but the dated system still makes things a bit tedious every here and there. As you progress through the various bits of the war-torn Athens, Kratos gets his next objective from the projection of a woman known as the Oracle. She's topless, which seems to be par for the course given the era of gaming that we're progressing through, and the fact that the devs really ran with the idea that this was probably more normal for women in ancient Greece or something. She points you towards her abode on the east side of town, promising you the secret of god killing. While this detour might have a lot to it, Kratos does at least name drop the title of the game when he sees Ares off in the distance. The battle-strewn streets eventually guide you into chasing a woman who runs away in fear, recognizing the Spartan and claiming that she knows what he did the decade prior. Kratos doesn't let a woman of all things talk to him that way and gives chase.
Wait!
I just want to take the key from around your neck too. Well, she tumbles over the ledge and dies, meaning that we got our key anyway. I think that's just how you got keys to places back in the day. From here, it's a lot of burning city battling. The fights, as always, can be handled the way that you want to handle them for the most part, and hidden areas continue to line your road, giving you pockets of stuff to collect as you continue on. The upgrade here comes directly from Big Daddy Zeus himself, allowing you to chuck lightning bolts as your main ranged attack. I just like how the guy's like, "Hey bro, what's going on? Yeah, you're gonna need like 2,000 volts of canned whoop ass in order to, well, there's this dude who's holding the bridge lever down and, you could probably throw a rock or something, but come on, it's lightning." I also like that Zeus was the one who forbid the gods from fighting each other and then will sit here and give you his main move to kill one of them off. As we get to the Oracle's temple, she gets dragged off by some harpies.
Kratos, hurry! What are you doing? I'm up here!
After shoving the statues around and looting the area, I finally deem it necessary to save the Oracle from her 6-foot fall by tackling her to the ground. Afterwards, she reads into Kratos' past, revealing more about the former Spartan captain's history. His bloodshed knew no bounds, and while he claimed to fight for the glory of Sparta, his wife knew that he only fought for his own satisfaction. When the Oracle is done reading his mind, she sends Kratos off to the desert to nab Pandora's box, his journey in Athens done for now. At this stage of the game, I have next to zero complaints. It's clear that the game is going to be shorter just from the sheer amount of back-to-back health and mana upgrades, but that's okay. I'm just having a great time, and the art direction only continues to impress me as Kratos makes his way down into the sewers. Honestly, this is one of the few times where the fixed camera works fantastically for cinematography specifically, as you make your way into a giant statue, down intricate stonework steps, and back out through a different set. It's gorgeous for its time, and I can feel the love put into all of this even now. The desert area that follows is also really cool, though I've always been a sucker for desert areas in games. After tracking down some sirens and making it through the temple here, Kratos blows a horn to summon Kronos, the last living titan. He's been imprisoned and sentenced to crawl through these endless sands with the Temple of Pandora on his back until he perishes. In the original mythology, Kronos was imprisoned in Tartarus or the Cave of Nyx. Also, I think his name is traditionally Cronus, with a U, but whatever. But I like this idea from the writers also, showing the mighty titan helplessly crawling around the desert as Kratos beckons him over to climb onto the temple on his back. Pandora's temple is probably home to the coolest areas in the game where everything comes together. dangerous traps and puzzles which rely on quick action from the player along with fights that take a bit of finessing to not get overwhelmed, all wrapped up in unique contraptions and a fun-looking environment. Puzzles tend to actually be pretty tight timing-wise, which is super welcome because it makes the game have a fair amount of challenge even on the default difficulty. There was a lot of thought put into this one, really making the idea that no mortal has been able to conquer this temple shine through at all times. Also, this was really one of those games that conditioned a lot of people into thinking that checking every corner was worth it. I think nearly every time I thought, oh, there's probably a chest in this little spot, there was. It's games like these with their constant rewards for sweeping the boundaries that ruined a lot of more modern open world game exploration for me. My only complaint is the power-up here, which comes from Artemis. You'd think it'd be more of a bow, but it's a big sword instead. This particular upgrade needed to come a lot sooner to be considered useful, as the Blades of Chaos have a tremendous advantage in reach by default, and I've already upgraded them to level 4 by this point in the game. By comparison, the Blade of Artemis has a bit of heft to it, but its short range makes me not want to use it at all this far into the game. As we make it further into the temple, another flashback unveils a bit of Kratos' past, showing how he came to be in the service of the gods. As he commanded his troops to fight against a barbarian invasion, it became clear that his soldiers were no match for the ferocity and sheer numbers of the brutal faction. As he was about to be killed, Kratos called out to Ares, offering his soul in exchange for the god's aid in crushing his foes. While the aftermath isn't shown right now, the way that the devs chose to slowly reveal this angry man's past is well-paced and intriguing, keeping the player invested. The temple continues on for a long while after this, making it clear that it's going to be the meat of the game. It's actually insane the amount of effort that was put into this interlocking, twisting design of the Temple of Pandora. It keeps feeling like I almost have to be done with it, but then I'm not upset at all when it continues to stretch on and on. I think my personal favorite puzzle chamber was the one with the caged Spartans, who await for someone like Kratos to come along and free them. Well, okay, maybe not someone like Kratos per se.
Don't do this! Please! No.
But even picking a favorite chamber is hard to do, as the temple introduces the likes of swimming mechanics and then uses them to connect you to chambers that you thought that you were completely done with. It's just Zelda levels of dungeon design, plain and simple. After Poseidon's section of the temple is done, Hades is up next. The tone shift is dramatic as we go from more traditional Greek imagery of decorative pillars and embroidered stonework to hellish reds, gritty machinery, and lava-lined halls. You traverse a maze of enemies, platform around the toughest damn spot that I've had to deal with in a long time, and eventually take on a Minotaur boss which has one of the most versatile movesets that I've seen from a boss in a game this old. Everything is immaculate to an almost scary degree. Because I'm gonna be honest, oftentimes when I take a look at the design decisions of older games, I usually see flaw after flaw pop up that I didn't notice when I was younger. But this game is damn near perfect, and it's almost done. I just keep thinking that there's gonna be something that pops up that makes me go, ah yeah, there it is. But I just keep getting blown away repeatedly. We get one final power-up from Hades after defeating the Bull, a homing attack that's actually pretty damn good. Definitely one of the better upgrades. When we make it down to the main section that we've been into and out of repeatedly, it's time to line everything up and connect the diamonds from the outer ring to the center of this place. This might take forever and can be a little boring, sure, but for some reason the architecture of this entire temple prevents me from being bothered by it. It's just, you know how in a lot of older games there will be this big ass pyramid or building or whatever, and you enter it and there's like 5 big chambers, a few halls, and a couple of small to medium side rooms. And you go through it and you feel accomplished, sure, but it always feels so much bigger on the outside to me. This place, it feels appropriately big. Like everything in here fits perfectly with this huge outside appearance of the temple. And when this big ass tower rises from the center, it's just this wow moment of, man, this place is fucking cool. Taking to the top of the temple has the rest of Kratos' past being revealed to you as you continue to solve puzzles. When he called for Ares, the god stepped in to destroy the barbarian, while also bestowing the Blades of Chaos onto Kratos. The chains of the blades seared into his flesh, a permanent reminder of his pledge to the god of war. As he continued to slay his enemies, his fervor whipped into a fever pitch. and all who knew of Kratos saw him as a demon commanding his hellish army to slay any who refused to worship Ares. This led to his final task, a simple mission to burn a village dedicated to Athena. When Kratos slayed every member of the village, he realized that in that moment he had been tricked by Ares, who wanted to see his champion unfettered by earthly ties. Ares wanted Kratos to be the strongest that he could be, and thus had him kill his own wife and child, the ashes of his family staining his skin a ghostly white for the rest of his days. This backfired, as Kratos now started working against the God of War, leading to this entire journey. The finale of the temple has more puzzles, trap rooms, and combat as you would expect at this stage. I will say that most of the quote-unquote bosses in this game tend to just be big puzzle rooms that are either inherently dangerous or have a strict time limit, or both, which is interesting with how combat-focused the game seems to be on the surface, but not anything that I'm against by any means. After finally making it to Pandora's box, Ares senses Kratos beginning to return with it, and chucks a gigantic wood beam in his direction. This kills Kratos outright. But the man is too angry to die, instead beginning the last part of the game as he claws his way out of the underworld. It's fucking awesome. There really is something to be said about having simple on the surface mechanics and ideas and just making the coolest story and puzzles that you can out of them. And God of War is an absolute testament to that philosophy. So hell is, it's about what you would expect. It's just 24/7 reruns of Family Guy and Kotaku reviews. I do gotta say that I've never felt dumber than when climbing the rotating tower of sharp nails though. I think I got knocked down like 25 times. After finally crawling out of the underworld, Athens lies in ruins, Ares seemingly victorious. Kratos fires off a lightning bolt, taking back Pandora's box, which has the mystical power to turn him big as fuck. Yeah, this fight took me about an hour. Actually, the first part wasn't bad and just had me learning when to block, and then after taking Ares down a peg, he gets inside Kratos' head and makes him give in to despair by reliving the vision of his family dying. The second phase has you trying to keep these monstrous versions of Kratos from killing his family, which can get tough if you don't pull out all of the stops. Also, there's a dedicated hug your family button to give them health. I get the whole F to pay respects meme, but where was the O to hug your family? Phase 3 has your hard-earned powers stripped away, and you pick up a statue's sword to fight with instead. This shit killed me. A lot. I think there's a path where Ares just hits the right moves and you murk him, but I just didn't know how to respond to certain moves, particularly the homing missiles and guard break. I'm sure there's a way, but shit man. This was a tough-ass fight on normal difficulty. I respect it, I just didn't know what I was getting into. When all is said and done, Kratos begs once again to be forgiven for his sins, only for Athena to tell him that while he is forgiven, the memories won't fade. And so we loop back to the beginning, where Kratos tries to throw himself off the cliff. And he succeeds, only to be yoinked back up by Athena, who says, "Hey pussy, we need a new God of War. No, killy thyself." And that's it for the first God of War, which I understand why they didn't want to end on a sad note, but man, I would have respected it if they did. It would have been such an antithesis of the norm for an action-adventure game in this era. Hell, maybe in any era. And God of War 2 still could have had what happened to Kratos starting in the underworld or whatever. But regardless, Kratos ascends Mount Olympus to watch over our war veterans, God bless him. Yeah, he might have snoozed during Vietnam, but we had to let that one slide after World War I and II. Fuck you. It's a cool ending, all things considered, but there's also this lingering feeling of wanting to tell the other gods to go fuck themselves after letting Kratos do all of their dirty work and not giving him a courtesy mind wipe. Wonder if they'll make a sequel. God of War 2, The Phaedos of Kratos, released nearly 2 years after the success of its predecessor. And my god, the title screen music is just You ever see a chef actually kiss the air after trying his food? What the fuck were these guys on when they made these games? So the second game kicks off with the other gods getting angry about Kratos creating so much fucking war. I mean, how could they have seen that one coming? Yeah, Kratos is still miffed about the gods forcing him to retain his memories, so he's just been commanding his men on the ground to siege city after city. Athena, in all of her wisdom, decides that enough is enough, and I don't know, maybe these guys just shouldn't have a god of war. Regardless, she attacks Kratos directly when he goes to help take another city, draining his big mode form back down to what he used to be. In terms of combat, Kratos still has all of his combat capabilities and moves from the previous endgame, with the exception of only having access to Poseidon's AoE attack in terms of magic for now. This is a great way to kick off a game, immediate motive to kill everything in sight, and an awesome moveset to back it up. The only real difference is that the devs knew about the PS4 getting trigger buttons in a decade, so they moved that button's functionality over to R1 instead. Unfortunately, this means that the dash is gone, which was my main movement before, but it's not a huge deal. So Kratos fights his way through the city, taking on a statue that Athena animated with magic before getting blasted away into a bathhouse. Of course, there are mandatory topless chicks behind one of the screens who you can approach to have off-screen relations with. It was very important to help the game feel real, you know? Our next big bit of tech here is the grappling hook, which is a great addition to literally any action game. I don't think I've ever not enjoyed grappling in video games, and I'm glad that I'm starting to see it pop up more in modern games. Carrying on through the city has us encountering the big-ass statue a few more times before Zeus speaks to Kratos, seemingly on his side again this time around. He throws down a large sword called the Sword of Olympus for us to use, meaning that the devs saw my review of the first game and how I complained about the last sword coming in too late. Good on them for taking criticism. But no, honestly, these guys have improved every bit of their mechanics from the last game, taking the amazing base that they started with and just polishing it down. Movement is snappier and allows for Kratos to zip around more on walls, ladders, and the like. Balancing sections feel better to navigate, making it seem like Kratos just has a good core like he should have. The game is just better overall in terms of core gameplay mechanics, which is awesome to see. So the sword is a trap. Well, kind of. I mean, you start out with maxed health, magic, Poseidon's rage, and Athena's blades, which replaced the blades of chaos at the end of the last game after you defeated Ares. That all goes away as you drain your godly powers into the blade to wield that instead. Of course, Kratos in his arrogant fury sees that as an advantage, one that he quickly puts to work as he scales the insides of the statue that Athena animated. When he's done, his own hubris causes him to taunt and guffaw much like Ares did throughout their fight in the first game. He's immediately put into his place as the hand of the statue crushes him in its death throes. The sword goes flying, cutting him off from his godly powers. And as he limps towards it, here comes Zeus to finish off the near-death Spartan. Honestly, as easy as it is to pick on the Greek gods for being assholes to each other and their followers alike, that's kind of how they were in actual mythology. The idea that they'd use this guy to kill off one of their own and then punish him for being himself after is very accurate to how they'd likely behave in some mythological story. And that said, there is a reason for this betrayal that comes at the end of the third game. Long walk for that one. Either way, Kratos is sent to hell again, but this time the narrator who's been in his ear the entire time reveals herself to be the Titan Gaia, and she urges him to continue to fight. Crawling out of the underworld is nowhere near as bad as it was in the previous iteration, as we get out pretty quickly and attempt to rally the last remaining Spartan who survived Zeus's attack before hopping on a Pegasus and starting a flying section. It's not too bad, and the death animations are cooler than ever as Kratos continues to rip through griffins and ravens who hound him on his way to awaken another Titan that lies imprisoned in the nearby mountain. Our goal is to gain the power of the Titans and the Fates to help us defy the gods who pushed us into this shitty situation. Running through the mountain area has us eventually finding Prometheus, who's accurately bound to a statue, his liver being eaten every day by Zeus's eagle before it regrows at night. To free Prometheus, we have to kill him, and to do that, we need an upgrade, specifically one from the Titan imprisoned here. Typhon the Titan does have a cute name, but he sees Kratos as a servant of Zeus. Kratos hasn't put too many points in diplomacy, so he attacks the Titan outright, carving out his eye and extracting the power of a magic bow from it. The puzzles so far have been pretty light, though that was kind of the case at the start of the last game too. This one's been more about exploration and combat with light puzzle elements, which kind of works just due to how much more open these locations have been. After killing Prometheus, his ashes mingle with the ones of Kratos' dead family, allowing him to harness rage mode again. Though just like the game now tells you that Gaia is the one allowing you to save your game rather than Zeus, the rage of the gods now becomes the rage of the Titans. This one's better because you can toggle it off when you don't need it, saving your bar. But that's it for this area of the game, which is interesting to me because you'd think it would have ended with you killing off Typhon, but you just steal the power from him and bolt. The next flying section adds on to the idea that you can shoot your bow now at enemies too, which is cool but ultimately not something I cared to do all that much. Our next destination is a temple where the Fates reside, and our ultimate goal is to use their power to go back in time to the moment where Zeus is about to kill us and stop him. The issue is that we've already been betrayed once, so what's to stop Gaia from using us as well? Kratos rubs together all 4 of his brain cells to ask Gaia what her reasoning is for all of this, which has her showing us how Zeus came to be the way that he is. If you recall, Kronos was supposed to be the last remaining Titan, the father of Zeus and his siblings. So fearful was he of his children rebelling against him that he decided to eat them as little babies. It was a good plan for a little while until his wife Rhea decided to trick Kronos. When Kronos came to eat Zeus, Rhea had him taken away to be raised by Gaia, instead giving Kronos a handful of bundled rocks to eat. When Zeus grew up and came to learn of what had transpired, his hatred extended beyond just a disdain of Kronos, instead unleashing his wrath on all of the Titans that he could. Though one might say that enslaving Kronos to crawl around the desert with the Temple of Pandora on his back might have been the most harsh. It's a great rendition as always of these myths. Puzzles continue to be pretty light from here, with combat taking the wheel. Of course, a lot of environments and backgrounds continue to be pretty damn impressive for their time, making exploration interesting. But these guys seem to have wanted more bosses for their players to fight, rather than their bosses being intricate puzzle rooms like the first game. This is seen in Theseus, who guards the temple and challenges Kratos to a deathmatch. This fight is decent. You can tell that there was probably supposed to be other big fights in the last game, but they got trimmed down to keep the Minotaur and Ares intact. This time around though, they kept some of the weaker bosses in, which Theseus definitely qualifies as. It's not a bad fight by any means, it's just kind of baseline. You start out with normal combat, then a phase where Theseus shoots down at you while you have to keep hammering him with arrows while replenishing your magic with enemies that pop up. And then that's about it. The finisher is as brutal as always though, and feels good to perform. Our power-up from this area is Ball Lightning, which we can place up to 3 times, definitely a solid pickup in the damage department. I think my only complaint about God of War 2 so far has got to be that I really don't know what my objective is until I complete it. With the first game, I pretty much always understood what I was attempting to do. Find the Oracle, have her open the gate to the desert, cross the desert and open the first mini-temple to call over Kronos, and so on. I just knew what I was doing and why. This game's like, alright Kratos, head to this mountain to get Titan powers. So I head there and I'm not sure if I'm killing the guy or not until I'm told to leave. Then I head to the next island and I am told the end objective, which is basically to find the Sisters of Fate and get them to send me back in time. But then I'm just dropped off at school and told to go find my class. I have to cross over to these big-ass horses, which were supposedly a gift to the Fates from Kratos in the hopes that they'll change his own fate. And I'm sitting here unbinding the horses and prepping them to run and all that, and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? When they do start to trample off, they pull the chains that they're attached to and smush the part of the temple that I was on together with the main part. Which is definitely some cool imagery, don't get me wrong, but it feels weird to be out of the loop about what's going to happen until it does happen. Regardless, we nab a bit of gear that lets us slow time, but only as long as a glowing green bit of power is nearby. Grabbing the time slow has us interacting with the Fates, who claim that we can't escape death. That Kratos will always be the way that he is despite him fighting to change things. Kratos of course gets pissed and shatters the statue that they were using to talk to him. You know, when I was a little younger, I always thought that God of War was about this edgy, angry man who was just mad because being mad is cool. Like I always viewed earlier Kratos as super shallow and one note. And honestly, that's probably still correct. But he also has these incredible bursts of introspection. He may have started out as a Spartan warrior who wanted victory at all costs, but it was Ares who fine-tuned him and pushed him to be the raging mess that he is now. And Kratos realizes that. Maybe a wiser man would understand that it's up to him to change himself, and that he needs to stray from blaming everything else for how he is. But the path to understanding that begins with the realization that he is fucked up, which is one of the only reasons that the reboots worked as well as they did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Our next boss is the barbarian who almost killed Kratos before he asked for Ares' help. Apparently that guy crawled out of the underworld also, leading to a slightly better fight than Theseus. There's not much to say about it in terms of cool tech, you just have to get him off his horse before you bop him with his own hammer. You get to keep the hammer afterwards, which I initially thought was going to be another Blade of Artemis, but I found myself using it against certain bigger enemies since the stagger is nice on it. Plus it showed up sooner this time around, making it something that I was willing to try out. So to get to the meat of the temple area where the Fates supposedly reside, we have to do a big workaround where we traverse through a swamp type area first. Again, the focus seems to be on the environmental coolness, but there is one puzzle where you have to send a body floating around a river so that you can nab it on the other side. And I just thought that one was pretty neat and clever. There's also another bit further in where a wounded Spartan pleads for you to help him out and save his friend, but I mean, this machinery's in the way, so...
No, what are you doing? I need your help.
Yeah, I guess it could still be considered edgy for the sake of being edgy, but I think it's more here to show that Kratos doesn't have any sort of compassion for others and will do everything to accomplish his goals. Regardless, the point to this entire runaround was to get the Golden Fleece, which allows you to deflect like you could in the last game, but with the addition of turning attacks back on enemies and traps, particularly projectiles. This is a cool-ass addition to the game, because you can even deflect things like Gorgon petrification beams back at enemies and objects. Speaking of which, the next boss is Uriel. Or Uriel? Urale? I don't know. She's the second oldest Gorgon and her rack is absolutely out during the entire battle. So I mean, I could kind of motion track it or I could just tell you about it. She swipes and she petrifies. That's about it. And don't get me wrong, it's actually a good fight with the new addition of being able to deflect her beams, but yeah, I'll just leave it to your imagination. After she's done, you get the same Stone Ray power-up from the last game, which I'm not opposed to. The puzzle section after this is awesome. Even though it's relatively straightforward, the way that the whole room connects is fun as hell to watch come together, especially when you have to twirl your way out with the grappling hook. This game took style to the next level, improving on all of the physics and movement from the first one. This entire bog area is done after all of this, allowing you to now progress further through the initial temple area with your Golden Fleece. As you head through the next bit, you'll occasionally hear someone calling out for help. Finding the guy has him lamenting the fact that you've let the door close behind you, as he's been trapped down here for a while since coming to the temple to attempt to appease the Fates. This is Perseus, the OG Greek hero that killed Medusa. Or at least there's enough similarities in his equipment and name to make me think that it's the same dude. Regardless, he views Kratos here as being a test from the Fates, and tries to kill him right on the spot. Of course, that doesn't go over so well for him. I think my favorite part about playing the anti-hero in these games is shit like this. After this, we pick up another sub-weapon in this spear that has quite a bit of range and fast pokes. Definitely a better call for me than the hammer personally, but I can confidently say that the hammer isn't bad at all after playing with it for a bit. The sub-weapons in this game are cool and might actually wind up being better than Athena's blades for a fair amount of the game. But I had a hard time switching my playstyle after getting so used to the blades over the course of 2 games personally. The temple area continues to swing wide as we cross a gigantic chasm that looks more Mayan than Greek, but still looks cool. I do think that the art direction for the second game wasn't as focused, with a lot of the environment turning out to be this kind of swampy jungle type of area spliced into a more traditional ancient Greece look. But I also think that you could get away with this kind of split just due to the fact that we're on an island way out in no man's land. Meeting Icarus only has us taking the environment to an even greater extreme, as the deranged man claims that only he should be allowed to cross the chasm here. Kratos demands his wings, leading to a scuffle that has us plummeting to the depths of the earth, where the Titan Atlas resides holding up the skies on his back. It's actually a common misconception about Atlas. Everyone thinks that he's holding the world up on his back, but it was actually the sky, like the celestial orb that is the sky. So bad news, we're down here now. The good news is that we ripped Icarus's wings off of his back and can glide for a bit at our will now. It's a good trade-off, I'd say. Traversing Atlas's area and his body is fucking strange. Like it's fleshy and bony and gross. But it's definitely cool. Upon getting back up to his arm, we shatter some of his bindings, causing him to turn on us. Atlas blames Kratos for imprisoning him down here, which I was confused about at first. But it turns out that this is detailed in the Chains of Olympus PSP game, which came out the same year after this game. Seems a little odd that they included that plot point in the game that came out first, but maybe the PSP game got delayed or they just planned on keeping the player curious for the next one. But yeah, Kratos uses his yelling diplomacy to tell Atlas that things have changed, and a cutscene plays out showing Zeus imprisoning the Titans using the Sword of Olympus. It's a really cool scene with lots of fun choreography, particularly for 2007. I think these guys made the most of the fact that the PS2 was on its way out, and therefore most of the technical limitations were solved for it. It's kind of like the difference between an early 360 title compared to a late one. And that night and day difference really fueled God of War 2 for huge moments like these. I mean, I know I'm playing the remastered version, but a lot of this stuff was still really technically cool on the PS2. After convincing Atlas that we're trying to kill Zeus now, he gives us our second to last power-up, a quake move that pairs really well with the lightning ball move. When we get propelled back to the surface, our final bit of the temple lies just ahead. This is where the devs really pull out all of the stops, mirroring a lot of the really cool ideas that flowed out of the Temple of Pandora. Giant mechanisms that require you to unlock and piece them together, trap rooms which test your reflexes, imagery that takes inspiration from various myths. As always, my favorite stuff has got to be the simplest. In this case, Kratos comes up to a book, stares at it for 5 seconds, and then goes, I can't read this shit. So he grabs a nearby scholar and sticks him in front of the book, demanding that he read it.
Read it.
Reminds me of my first grade teacher.
Read!
That also reminds me of my first grade teacher. The combat gets kicked up a notch too, with constant assaults from enemies indicative of the endgame. If you're as bad as I am, this is quite a challenge that requires you to balance your Rage of the Titans while constantly knowing when to block and when to go in. The challenge in general, though, definitely peaks from here on out. I died a lot, which kind of mirrors what was happening towards the end of the first game. Puzzle chambers are brutal until you figure out what exactly they want from you. Enemies are liable to stone and instant kill you, or try to chuck you into the lava, or just try to get you killed on traps. The fates are very fickle and consistently want you to do shit around the temple for who knows what reason. I guess the perks of writing a faction that works in mysterious ways means that you can just come up with bullshit for the player to go through. Here, go on and take this key. Why don't you go see what's going on over there? Hey yo, we need you to burn 3 enemies to death. Oh shit, you just sacrificed another scholar. Nice! Take this key, we need you to bring a phoenix back to life. Oh, and then blow it out of the lava with the horn, and it'll knock over 2 statues, and then you can go into the next room. Whatever you want, I guess. I mean, I'm definitely having fun, and this is 100% a nitpick, but it kind of feels like I'm playing through a Rube Goldberg machine at times. So the finale of this area has us fighting a mystery warrior in the dark. It's heavily stylized and looks really damn cool. The dude fights like me, all offense and no blocking, so defeating him isn't too hard. Turns out that it's the Spartan that Kratos sent back to rally the troops in Sparta at the beginning of the game. I was wondering if the writers would do something like this, and I'm so glad that they did. I mean, realistically, things have been fucked for a while now, and the plan has been to go back in time for pretty much the entire game. Might as well make things the worst that they can be. But more importantly, whether it's for this man or for all of Sparta, Kratos shows that he cares about more than just simple vengeance here, much like he showed a love for his family at the end of the first game. And then a kraken rises up from here, and I thought that maybe Poseidon was being sent to either help or to finish off Kratos. But it turns out to just be a kraken. I mean, I guess it could have been Poseidon's, but yeah, seems a little out of place. Initially, Kratos gets nabbed and he gives in to his fate, his inner monologue admitting defeat. Gaia comes in under the guise of his wife, showing him the burning Sparta and giving him one last push to fuel his rage. This translates to an upgrade for the Rage of the Titans, but more importantly allows Kratos to break free of the Kraken's grip and begin the real fight. This is a fantastic fight just because it still gives you those puzzle elements, but it doesn't just leave you to blindly flail around and figure things out as the beast assaults you. I mean, Gaia doesn't tell you what to do, the game instead just pans briefly to the first puzzle piece, allowing you to figure out the rest. The end result has you shooting the bridge through the Kraken's mouth, effectively impaling it. It's fucking gnarly and I loved every second. This is the formula that God of War games would later perfect, giving the player the satisfaction of defeating a giant boss without it becoming a mash fest of offense. After felling the monster, we hop aboard the Phoenix and use it to fly to, I guess, the real temple. I thought we were at the real temple. Why wouldn't we land here from the beginning? I guess to power up first, but yeah, I don't know, whatever. Either way, the big boss fight against the Fates comes immediately. Yeah, these guys have been taunting you along with everyone under them throughout your entire excursion, going on about how you can't fight against your fate and how this is for the good of Olympus and all of that. Athena's even popped in to tell you that you can't change all of this, how it's imperative that Zeus is victorious. The fight against the Fates is real neat as you might expect, with one of them pulling you into the past to try to end your victory against Ares. Once you ward her off, you fight the other Fate again in the present, using her green gem to slow time when the other tries to assist and then shattering the mirror that she's in. It's a great fight, one that had me slowly figuring out what exactly to do and being kind of proud of that moment when everything came together. The final chamber is a bit of an enemy rush followed by the final Fate sister, Clotho, or Clotho, probably Clotho, but it's spelled like cloth. She's the one who spins the threads of human life into the tapestry of fate. I just like that there are these two axes that come in like Sen's fortress right at the start of the area. Like, okay guys, I know that there's no fucking way that any intruder would get this far, but you think we should build like a couple of swinging axes on this bridge just in case? You never know, it might get them.
Great way to return to the time.
Fuck! I don't know, this whole ascent is definitely super video gamey, which isn't a bad thing from a mechanics point of view. But you have this deity of fate going on about how this area was never meant for mortal hands, and you're just using these haphazardly strewn about devices to stab her hands clean off. I mean, I imagine they're for cutting threads, but still, it's kind of funny to me as the player because all I see is a hand torture room. When we get to the top, we've got one more boss fight before it's home free to the past. It's actually more of a mini boss fight because it ends pretty quickly. I guess it's a puzzle boss if anything. It's alright I guess, it's just a little quick. After tinkering with the threads of fate, we head into that moment where Zeus stabbed Kratos, sucker punching him and beginning the final fight. This one was a lot easier than Ares was, but I also think that Ares might have been a little too hard. There's a big mode fight where you hit his hand, then a normal size fight with the Blade of Olympus switching back and forth between us, and then finally a QTE section. The end result has Kratos sawing into Zeus like a turkey dinner, only for Athena to pop in and stop Kratos. With her body. Not in that way. She takes his sword to her chest. That is not a euphemism. The weirdest thing about this scene is how off-putting the tone is. Like, Kratos has never shown any love for Athena. In fact, he's only shown annoyance and disdain. And yet when he stabs her, he's like, oh my god, no! It's really fucking weird. Especially when Zeus flees and Kratos is like, oh well, peace out Athena, I'm gonna go kill the rest of the gods now. I don't know, it's just back and forth with the tones. After Zeus flees, Kratos somehow gets back to the thread room, changes the threads again, then goes back in time to when the Titans were being hunted down by the gods. Then he takes all of them with him to the future, scaling Mount Olympus on the back of Gaia. And then that's it for God of War 2. There's a lot wrong here if you think too much about it. For one, past Kratos is just fucked now if multiple timelines exist. Like he gets stabbed by Zeus and sent to the underworld and Gaia isn't there to save him. Secondly, the guy could time travel now. Yeah, it's definitely portrayed as finicky, and I was willing to overlook it the first time around as luck. But then he just pops back out and does it again, exactly where he wants to be. Why wouldn't he go back to kill Zeus as a baby? Or save his family? I don't know, it's messy. Because it could just all be explained away as, well, he was very mad and he just wanted to kill everything now. But even setting aside all of that, the ending really portrays the mindset of the devs with these games, especially 2 and 3. They didn't want to overthink the time travel shenanigans, they wanted to create epic, sweeping scenes of cool action and fun ideas. And that mindset is the thing that led to the biggest issues for me with God of War 2. Every time I was confused about why I was doing something or what I was doing can now be chalked up to, well, it looks cool, doesn't it? And it did look cool. There was some fantastic imagery throughout this game. A phoenix being born, giant horses being unleashed, buildings being destroyed as means of progression, random human scholars kicking around the Temple of Fate area just to be sacrificed. All of it was very fun to look at, but not fun to think about. God of War 1 had a very solid series of events. You knew what you were doing and why. You were intrigued about this angry man's past that was being unveiled slowly. You saw a character who wrestled with his feelings back and forth and ultimately gave into despair before being elevated to the highest possible position. It was a solid story that was well-rounded and easily could have ended there. Not that I wanted it to, it just could have. God of War 2 from the beginning was setting up for a third game, and it feels like almost every part of it was filler until the end. You had strong intrigue with Zeus's betrayal, but then you spend the whole game trying to go back in time without the supplement of learning about Kratos' past or the like. I mean, I guess you could say you learned about the Titans, but they're just not as intriguing. Don't get me wrong, every bit of it mechanics-wise was a dramatic improvement over its predecessor. It's impressive how well they polished the formula from the first game, but I still think that the second game is probably the ugly duckling of the trilogy for me. Alright, before I get into the third game, I want to talk about my sponsor, NordVPN. I've been a big advocate of VPNs ever since moving over to Germany and back, and Nord was my go-to for those 3 years abroad. Yeah, seeing German on my Google searches was fun for half a day, but I do a lot of searching and something had to change quickly. With Nord, I was able to feel like I never left the US whenever I did a search, was able to hop over to other countries and servers when I needed to, and I was able to keep up with any American programming on what feels like countless streaming services. This was very important for football in particular. Potentially more important though is Nord's guarantee to not track or share what you do online, giving you peace of mind while browsing using their built-in robust data encryption. If you're on the go like I was, Nord is supported on dedicated apps for all major platforms, up to 6 separate devices. If any of this sounds like something you need, please feel free to visit nordvpn.com/saltfactory for 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. Thanks guys. God of War 3 released 3 years almost exactly after the second game. It's actually kind of impressive how spot on these guys were with their releases. The game opens with a heavily stylized cinematic that looks absolutely stunning, one that details what happened in the previous games while the dev names scroll across the screen. Now this is how you do a credit roll. And the introductory sequence is even more awesome, kicking off right where we left off at the end of the second game. High above Kratos is the gods who we'll be squaring off against, and I'm actually really impressed by their design. I remember being able to pick out who most of them were right away when I first played, each one looking exactly what you'd expect Hades, Poseidon, Zeus, fake Apollo, and Hermes to look like.
Zeus! Your son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus!
Oh fuck, yeah, I forgot to mention that. That was a big plot point at the end of the last game, but Zeus is Kratos' father. It didn't change much in the moment, but it does make a bit of a difference now and a much greater difference in the sequels later on. So first things first. I know this is the remastered version, but this game is stunning compared to its predecessors. Not only that, but the sound design is something I noticed immediately because my moveset is verbatim the exact same moveset that I had with Athena's blades in the last game, which is amazing because I already know how to play and combo things because of it. But the effects of the chain swinging around and slicing enemies sound so much better, it makes your attacks feel a lot weightier. A lot of devs sleep on good weapon sound design, but the better it is, the better it feels to swing at your enemies in games like these. Everything about this opener and the ascent up Olympus is incredible, a fully realized vision from the developer since their start 5 years prior. Poseidon kicks things off, shooting through a climbing titan and unleashing his ocean beasts once he hits the water. These things are cool, as the tentacles shoot from the ocean and bloom into these water stallion spider hybrids. From this alone, you can see that the devs are already willing to experiment with less traditional Kraken-esque monsters and come up with stuff that takes the original myths as a basis and builds off of them. The QTEs have changed from popping up in the middle of the screen and instead stick to the edges, which I'm cool with since their location corresponds with where the buttons are on the controller. Almost immediately you're fighting against Poseidon, which sets the tone for this game nicely. You're not here to navigate some temple, you're in a boss rush, and Aquaman is just the first victim. The kill cam for Poseidon shows it from his point of view, which is fucking amazing. I don't know, this game is already top notch and it's been like 20 minutes. I like how killing Poseidon raises the sea level by 10 meters. So much for saving Sparta in the previous game, huh? As we finally scale the mountain to Olympus, Zeus appears to end things once and for all. Now you know that this isn't going to be it, but with how fast we got here, something has to happen to make this game a game, right? In this case, Zeus tosses a mean lightning bolt at Gaia and Kratos, causing them to plummet back down the mountain. As Kratos demands for Gaia to help him up, Gaia claims that she can't do that without falling herself. She then coldly states that Kratos has served his purpose, that he was merely a pawn to put the Titans within striking range of the Olympians.
You were a simple pawn, nothing more.
God, it's no wonder that Kratos has trust issues. This is like the 4th time that he's been betrayed. I mean, at least with this one, it's less about, oh, you're a menace who no one likes, and is more about Gaia being able to hold on herself, valuing her place in this fight more. But yeah, down we go all the way to the river Styx.
Having suffered the ultimate sacrifice, I have been denied release.
Oh yeah, that'll make the best of us angry, brother. I'm with you on this one. So the river Styx is what resets us back from near godlike to mortal again, as once again our health, mana, and XP all get drained. At least I still have Athena's blades.
These are the blades of exile.
God damn it. Yeah, Athena the teenage ghost pops by to say, hey, I know I died protecting Zeus, but I have metagame knowledge and Sony Santa Monica is telling me that it'd be a lot cooler if you killed Zeus after all. She also resets my blades to level 1, though with a different skin, and then tells me that the Flame of Olympus is the source of Zeus's power, which I need to destroy before being able to take him down. Traversing the underworld has the devs taking less of a hellfire and brimstone approach and more of a dark, gloomy vibe. You immediately gain access to your first spell since spells are tied to your weapons. It's an AoE that acts like Poseidon's Rage from the first game, but is more stylized to suit Kratos, the spirits of his fallen Spartan soldiers surrounding him in a phalanx. The animations for every little thing are top-notch, which I noted specifically with the Gorgon that slithers around and up the walls. Everything about this game feels like they took that initial idea of being the best in the genre and fine-tuned it to absolutely sparkle. Even little things like using a Gorgon's head as a one-time petrification ray is something that takes an idea from the previous entries and makes it feel like it's still included but not outright repeated. From here we get the bow pretty quickly, burning a guy to death who was trapped down here by Bramble. I just like how the guy goes, yeah, so I'm trapped in this very flammable prison. Help a brother out, would you? Yeah. Flammable. Yeah, I've got you, fam.
Please, you cannot die this way!
The bow is the best version yet simply because it uses an entirely new bar separate from your magic bar which recharges over time. The imagery while climbing through the underworld is amazing as you would expect by now. There's a chamber where 3 judges reside to judge the souls that have fallen down here and send them further into Tartarus or up to Elysium. There's the smith god Hephaestus living down here in torment, and unhelpfully notes that no one can touch the Flame of Olympus. And eventually you recover the Blade of Olympus, which can only be used as part of your rage move now appropriately dubbed the Rage of Sparta. After puzzling a bit longer, we make it to Hades, who's not exactly happy with us.
I will see you suffer as I have suffered.
I find it interesting that the devs went for the 2 brothers of Zeus immediately back to back. I think most devs would have saved them for second and third to last, not that I'm opposed to it. Honestly, it was probably more to do with the whole climbing from bottom to top that led to this boss order. I also find myself almost confused after killing these guys. You have to understand, the last 2 games didn't really have these really big epic boss fights until the very end of the game, so having them pop up immediately has part of me going, nah, they're not really dead already, are they? Still, this fight is real fun. Lots of big moments and fun to watch maneuvers from both sides. the culmination of which has you stringing Hades up and taking his chained weapons, only for him to pop back up and for you to extract his soul. These claws are our new weapon that we can switch to, and they're not bad. They're almost like an alternate form of the Blades of Exile, but with the addition of being able to summon soul creatures to assist you for a brief period of time. You can swap out what you summon, which is pretty cool, but it kind of feels more like a gimmick. Honestly, the claws ran into the same issue that I had with the Blade of Artemis, though not because they came too late per se, but because they have a similar moveset compared to something that I've already been actively using and upgrading. Still, I guess I wouldn't call them bad by any means. When we make it back to Hephaestus, he seems surprised but amused by the fact that Kratos killed Hades. He then explains that when Kratos killed Ares, Zeus snapped and became very cruel. This led to Zeus taking away Hephaestus' daughter, Pandora, which sent the Smith god into a spiral of turmoil. He decides to plead to Kratos to rescue his daughter, trying his best to appeal to any semblance of humanity left in the raging Spartan.
But surely you can understand. You were once a father, too.
Kratos seems to weigh these words briefly before going on his way. On the opposite end of the appealing spectrum is Big Gaia, who we happen to run into on her ascent back up. Ironically, she asks Kratos to help her out with getting back up the mountain.
Kratos, do I mean nothing to you?
You were a means to an end, Gaia. Nothing more.
Yeah, this is the first time that something like this has felt 100% justified, and chopping off the personification of Earth's hand isn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's like throwing batteries in the ocean, it just feels right. From here we get to see what the war is doing to Olympia, the city just below the summit of Mount Olympus. Also, Olympia is Washington's capital. Fun fact. That's what I'm here for, fun facts, baby. It has seen better days, but this is just what it's like in Greece sometimes. The occasional economic ruin, the occasional war between Olympians and Titans. Great heroes, though. Helios is our next god on the chopping block. That would be fake Apollo. We start by shooting his chariot down and getting a big up-top assist from, I wanna say, I don't know, Hyperion? Afterwards, we find Helios all fucked in the corner, only for him to get protected by the entire Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. Fortunately, a Cyclops comes along and Kratos takes a play from the little gremlins in God of War 2, which rode the Cyclopes and commanded them occasionally. You remember that? I probably didn't mention it, but they did that. After the field is cleared, Helios is still on the ground, and pleads with Kratos for mercy before attempting to solar flare him like Krillin. That becomes negated by doing this maneuver. Just this. Kratos then tries to get info out of Helios only for the god to clearly lie to the Spartan, still fiercely loyal to Zeus. So Kratos rips his head off, and I don't think I can show that. It's just like a dude getting his head torn off, fill in the blanks I guess. I just feel like it's on the same level as one entire titty on YouTube. When we obtain the head, the sun goes out, further fucking Greece over. They'll bounce back, don't worry. This will serve as our Gorgon head, but instead of stoning enemies, we can reveal secrets. I'm not a big hold this button to reveal secrets kind of guy because now I'm doing it literally fucking everywhere. I know there's a tiny bit of a shimmer if you look closely, but I don't really do that. The idea is cool at least, even if it leads to some really dark areas where you can't see shit. Brief tangent here, but some of the secrets in this game in particular are fucking stupid, because they often have you jumping into pits that you cannot see the bottom of. There was one at the start where I was rewarded for falling into the pit that I was clearly meant to jump over, and from then on it was like, oh, I guess I could just jump into stuff like this and climb out. But then almost immediately after, I jumped off a bridge and died. And it seems to be random. I know there might be some sort of context clues, but how do you explain the fact that I jumped off into one part of a pit, got a chest, climbed out, and then jumped into the same damn pit only to die? Yeah, that's some bullshit. So we get a big boost from the vents leading from the cusp of the underworld way up into the caverns of Olympus. Along the way, we see our friend Hyperion. Actually, I think he might be Atlas. Well, whatever his name is, he's dead to us now since he takes a swipe at Kratos. Then we continue up to the old cube maze. Well, it's not really a maze yet, just kind of a section where we have to kill enemies while protecting a chain in the center. I remember this being kind of tough when I first played the game, but it really isn't that bad. Ah, journalism mode, my old friend. Next up we have Fast Loki. I think his Greek name is Hermes.
Kratos, the fool who killed his own blood. Kratos, the fool among mortals and gods.
That didn't really rhyme.
Consumed by vengeance to his last breath, the Spartan lights the way to dusty death.
Okay, good, he pulled it off. Look, the poem rhymes better in the dev's native language of English. Before we can fight Hermes though, he runs up the chain of fate, meaning that we gotta take the slow way up. Unfortunately, we don't get a cool soundtrack while we climb for 4 minutes straight, it just kinda fades to black. Kojima did not die for this. It is cool that it shows us that we made it past the starting point of the game now as we finally get into the lower bits of Olympus proper. Here we get a bit of exposition as we approach the Flame of Olympus, which turns out to just be Pandora's box from the first game. It retains its same power from God of War 1, the power to kill a god. But with it being engulfed in flames that will kill anyone who touches it, we can't access it again. That does not stop Kratos from trying to touch it despite the warning that he received from Hephaestus, only stopping when the ghost of Athena shows up to tell him that hot equals bad. Athena then explains the box's origin, how it was forged by the smith god to house evil emotions like greed and fear. Kratos only got a fraction of its power before, and to gain access to the full dose, he'll need to find and free Pandora after all. This is where Hermes swoops back in to be a jackass. His plan seems to be to just run Kratos into danger, but it's really just a big chase sequence while he taunts him. Eventually, Kratos slows him down with a boulder launched at the statue that the god was sitting on, leading to a smaller boss fight. Hermes is pretty wounded from the statue crumbling, so he can only hit you with short bursts of speed, and is only really a minor inconvenience because of it. The end result has Kratos lopping off both of the god's legs, unleashing yet another plague onto the rest of the world, but getting a fresh pair of Jordans out of the exchange. There are people who would do worse for certain shoes. Weird, wonder how that happened. This gains us our quick dash, which can be used to traverse walls. I will say that the focus in the third game with items is completely different than the previous games. Pretty much every upgrade in the last two were used to fight differently. Sometimes it was easier to use the Gorgon Ray, sometimes it was easier to use the lightning orbs, and so on. Even the bow wasn't used for puzzles as much as I thought it would be. Meanwhile, a good half of the upgrades in God of War 3 directly affect how you navigate and traverse the environment, lending to more unique looking movement. From here, it's all about trying to get Pandora's box into a position to be opened, but it becomes clear pretty quickly that that's not going to help without freeing Pandora first. I know this puzzle was simple, but I've always been a sucker for rhythm-based minigames, so tuning the instrument in this room and playing it was pretty fun. Next up we meet Hera, Zeus's wife. She seems to be a lush who drinks constantly and has no vested interest in Kratos succeeding, so she sicks Hercules on us. Which, I think Hercules might be my favorite fight in the game.
This is not between us, Hercules.
Isn't it? You were always Zeus's favorite. Think about it, brother. While I was stuck cleaning the Augean stables, he chose you to destroy Ares. Well, not convinced. How about this? While you were being crowned the God of War, I was sent to find an apple.
It isn't about pinning down some scrawny god and then knocking them out after dealing with their magic. It's a brutal cage match between two beefy men, and it's fucking awesome to watch even as a player. Every bit of fighting against Hercules is just eye candy where the two are pummeling the hell out of one another. Eventually you pry his case deuce off his hands, which are some of my favorite weapons in the game since they're essentially just boxing gloves to beat your enemies with. The game calls them cestus, but it's more than one, so I don't know. But the fight just keeps going. It isn't like, oh man, now he's weak and useless. The big fucker just keeps trucking. I don't know, this is just right up my alley. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. After plummeting down into the sewers with Big Herc's body, we find our way to Poseidon's chambers, which has a puzzle revolving around a girl who's not fully clothed. I wouldn't mention her normally, but you wind up escorting her to safety only for Kratos to use her to hold up a heavy-ass gate. Then the wheel of the gate folds her in half like a lawn chair, which I have a feeling a lot of fans of horrific imagery like this enjoy Mortal Kombat also. I mean, I do. There's a bug here where you can slip through a one-way gate, and that causes the instance of the girl calling for help to continue for as long as you're here, even after you move her. It fucks with the subtitles, unfortunately, but I guess it is what it is. Regardless, Kratos gets to another hologram-type projection of Pandora, which he's encountered a few times during his climb up. This time, instead of telling Pandora that he doesn't care about her, he asks her where she is, only for Zeus to come over the comms and scold Kratos once more. The most interesting bit about all of this is that there's a note on the ground from Poseidon, a memo stating that he fears that Zeus is losing his mind now that Kratos has killed Ares. Which, at the time, is ironic given that Zeus helped Kratos to do just that. This has been hinted at repeatedly by several characters up until this point, all of them claiming that since Zeus imprisoned his father Kronos, he feared that Kratos would do the same or worse to him. Alright, next up is Aphrodite. Anyone who knows what Aphrodite is the goddess of knows how this one is gonna go, and you're out of your mind if you think I'm gonna show it. Let's put it this way. Kratos enters Aphro's chambers and walks into a 3-box pileup. We're talking 3 chicks tying repeatedly at rock, paper, scissors and somehow still all winning. All 3 of them have called for the plumber and have gotten bored of waiting. Kratos helpfully offers to fix the pipes, but this is a 2-person job, leading to off-screen compression faucet installation complete with a deep farmhouse sink basin. The other women are impressed with Kratos' handiwork and celebrate on the sidelines after getting a first-hand look at proper mounting and fitting that only a certified professional can provide. After this, there's a big O above Aphrodite's head, which usually means that you can execute whoever you're looking at. I was ready to tear a bitch's head off now that she had been worn down, but the only thing that I slay is that ass as round 2 commences. It's a little disappointing if you ask me, but I guess that big O was more literal this time around. 2010 was wild, man. Alright, so we head back to Hephaestus, who we need to guide us to the labyrinth where Pandora supposedly resides. There's either some miscommunication or I straight up didn't understand something, because I swear to God this big fucker asked Kratos to save his daughter and then got upset when he asked to enter the labyrinth where she resides. I guess it's the difference between saving her and using her to dispel the flame of Olympus, but it isn't communicated very well. You see, Pandora was crafted by Hephaestus, initially to be a key that keeps the box safe. When the flames Hephaestus was crafting took on a life of their own, he grew to love this life as a daughter and vice versa. The reason why the box was initially not on fire was due to Hephaestus lying to Zeus, claiming that the absolute safest place for the box would be on the back of Kronos. When Kratos proved that wrong, Zeus tortured Hephaestus until he admitted that Pandora was the true key to keeping the box safe. That's when the flames were activated, with Pandora being trapped in the labyrinth as the only way to disperse the fire. But if she's used to do this, it's implied that she'll die. It's interesting because it's hard not to think of Kratos as the good guy, the one that was manipulated and taken advantage of by the gods. But you could have easily reversed this entire scenario, having the game be about this monster of a raging man who's trying to take down the beloved and holy Olympus. This is especially true with how much pure destruction that Kratos has caused mortals in this game alone. But either way, Hephaestus then suddenly goes, "Oh, you know what? If it's to take down Zeus, then tell you what. You go down to Tartarus, grab me a rare material, and I'll craft you a wonderful weapon." He doesn't sound like that, but you know, he does in my head. Kratos has the foresight of a toddler and immediately agrees despite the complete 180 in Hephaestus' tone and demeanor. It's kind of hard to feel bad about him getting repeatedly betrayed when he keeps walking into it, though maybe he just doesn't give a shit. My money's on the latter. So the pits of Tartarus is where Kronos wound up getting re-imprisoned after Zeus threw a hissy fit about Kratos using the box to kill Ares. I know if you haven't played this game, you're likely thinking that it's bizarre that Zeus is so angry about Kratos killing Ares after all of the help that he got from the Olympians, Zeus included. But there is a good reason for all of this confusion, which comes up right at the end of the game. It's a very long walk, and you'll probably be sitting here this entire time thinking, why? But it does make sense later. Regardless, Kronos isn't happy with Kratos either. I mean, who is at this point? Likewise, it's boss time. This one's especially interesting due to the scale of the fight, and how insignificant you feel at first. But then you remember that you're playing as Kratos. And slowly but surely, you begin to inflict some damage. First you blind his eyes. Then you do a little external damage to the skin. Then you rip off a fingernail. Then you slice open his shoulder. Then you try to hammer at his bindings and he winds up swallowing you. If this fucker ever chewed, things might be different. This leads into what I thought would be a whole level in the guy's gut, and I imagine that it probably started out that way. But it instead winds up being a mash fest as Kratos then starts cutting up Kronos from the inside, bursting out of the side of the Titan. Then he gets back to work on those chains, shattering the bindings, driving the splintered bit up into his chin and dealing the death blow after. I mean, sweet fuck, these guys came up with some gnarly shit. Dropping back in on Hephaestus has him crafting you a weapon, giving it to you, and then trying to kill you. Something tells me that he isn't the brightest. Thankfully, we can help to make him the brightest since the Nemesis Whip is another long-reaching chain weapon that uses electricity as its main move. It's definitely worth upgrading as simply holding down the square button has you shooting out a volley of low but fast DPS that adds up quick. I could see this thing being a powerhouse, but I'm partial to the style of the Kratos and the Blades of Exile. The Mirror Room is up next, which is just a big reference to Portal. Unfortunately, the desire to pay respects to the Valve game leads to one of the worst puzzles that these guys came up with, simply because it just doesn't follow the same rules all the way through. Basically, you learn that the blue portals connect to other blue portals, and orange connects to orange. So you can nab some bonus treasure by firing off a rope into the portals at various heights. But then there are these last two chests, and the way to get them involves firing the harpoon through the blue portal, which comes out the orange one for some reason. I mean, traditionally that's how that worked, but it didn't work at first in this one. I don't know, I know it's not that deep, but it's bad puzzle design when you break your established rule over the last stretch. So to the labyrinth, which starts as a hedge maze that involves you using Hera's crystal to change the perspective of the area, leading to some really fun ideas. Hera's here obviously and continues to berate Kratos for a while before he tosses her down the stairs. He's content to ignore her until she calls Pandora a little whore, causing him to snap. I guess that comment about having a daughter got to him after all. He snaps Hera's neck, causing her life alert necklace to go off and kill all the plant life in Greece. These guys can't catch a break, I guess. The second part of the labyrinth is the real deal, taking you back down to the caverns where all of those cubes were. This was designed by Daedalus, who was commanded by Zeus to build the labyrinth to house Pandora. To motivate Daedalus, Zeus promised the safe return of his son Icarus, who, is definitely not alive anymore. Then, when Daedalus was done, well, Zeus strung him up here. Yeah, that sounds about right. The boss in this area is a big scorpion. God of stinging people, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure it has worshippers. When I think Greece, I think scorpions. At this stage, I'm positively swimming in XP, as the third game is probably the only one that has this much experience sitting out in the open. The devs must have decided to dial back the hiding of chests because I maxed 3 weapons and was working on the last one by this time. They also decided to dial back the puzzles because this labyrinth is the final stretch and it absolutely pales in comparison to the previous game's final puzzle rooms, making the finale more about sheer combat instead. I mean, I get it, that's kind of the vibe this game has given off from the start, and I applauded it for it at first. But part of me definitely misses the puzzles and how cool they felt to solve. When we do make it to Pandora, this very strange, almost shoehorned in emotional tone is set to it. Because from the start, every time Kratos has talked to Pandora, he's basically told her to go fuck herself. But that said, there's a very good reason for this that doesn't make sense now, and again, will make sense at the end of the game. For now, it's great to see Kratos begin to take on the start of that fatherly personality that he develops in the next 2 games. It is very sudden, like I said, but let's say that there's a bit of emotion besides rage that's beginning to leak from our guy here. From here we have to escape with the girl, who seems to be the direct inspiration for Kratos' son later on by the amount of times that she consistently calls out to the Spartan. Also, this next bit is just fast platforming with Pandora getting into enough near-death experiences to rival Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider reboots. It's just... I mean, come on. Someone was getting off on this. And now we fight. And fight. And fight. I fought for so long that I wondered if I was missing something. But yeah, I guess this is just what the devs cooked up. I don't know, this is probably the only part of the game where I can outright say that these guys stumbled compared to their previous entries. When we make it up to the top, I jump back down to smash the Chain of Fate, which will let us raise the labyrinth so that Pan can do her thing. Fucking PS3 looking ass, get in the fire.
Pandora, no!
You know why I'm here. You brought me here to do this.
I will find another way.
God damn it. Yeah, Kratos has gone into full PTSD mode and is now visualizing Pandora as his lost daughter. And this sudden, unexpected genesis of feelings beyond anger happens fast. But it's safe to say that these feelings have been bubbling beneath the surface for a long while now. So yeah, 2 rounds of Mortal Kombat style fighting against Zeus before Pandora tries to erase herself again, causing Kratos to choose between stopping Zeus or saving Pandora. Pan is actively telling her to let him go, and Zeus is telling him to hold on to her. But at the last moment, Kratos does let go, the box finally being freed. And inside, well, there's nothing. It's probably the best array of emotions that the devs could have put the player through with all of this build-up.
Empty! After all you have sought, after all you have sacrificed, it ends in another stunning failure!
And now we begin one of the most bombastic, harrowing, and just amazing endings to a game that I've ever experienced. So Zeus and Kratos begin duking it out over the chaos that is the world now that the gods have all nearly died. And here comes Big Gaia to interfere again. Initially, this disturbance by the Titan was an annoyance, but it actually lended itself to a magnificently designed fight. Every bit of it revolves around destroying you and helping you to succeed if you know what you're looking for. You and Zeus fight it out in the Heart Chamber of Gaia. This has Zeus splitting into clones which hit just as hard as he does, meaning that parrying is very key for a lot of this fight. And then Gaia's heart starts pulsing, with Zeus taking advantage of that pulse by siphoning health from the Titan. This teaches you that you can do the same, but you need to either do it before the god or stagger him so that he can't. And this delicate balance is something that you have to juggle at any given moment. Yeah, it's fucking hard, but it feels really good throughout it even when I did die a few times. It's just a great fight. The end result has Kratos finally putting Zeus down, or so it seems. The Olympian spirit pops out to kill Kratos once and for all, sending him into a spiral of self-therapy that takes the Spartan to his darkest depths. We see all of the events that played out to bring him to this moment, all while following the light of Pandora. This guided tour has Kratos trying to forgive himself for allowing his family to die by his hand, for allowing himself to be so utterly consumed by rage. The memories of those who he ruthlessly killed or used flicker into his ears. All of these suppressed emotions amount to one thing: guilt. Guilt for acting the way that he has, for taking the path that he has. The reason that he's been so cold towards everyone is because he didn't know how to process what had happened in his life. So he gripped onto the one tool that he still had to keep him going: wrath. And yet there's one more emotion that Pandora bestowed upon him, one that mirrors the real-life myth: hope. It's hope that allows Kratos to begin healing, to come back from the brink of death, and to put Zeus down once and for all. The camera goes into first person, showing things from the Spartan's perspective, which is actually something that these guys were thinking about doing when designing the first game. I can safely say that it wouldn't have worked as well for an entire game, but was amazing for this moment where Kratos punches Zeus bloody. It's just a remarkable ending to this game, and it only gets better. Athena reveals herself once more, claiming that the Spartan should give her the gift that he received from Pandora's box. Kratos, still thinking that the box was empty, tells her as such. That's when Athena reveals that as the evil emotions were sealed inside Pandora's box, she added hope to counteract the evil that would be released. When Kratos opened the box initially, those evil emotions flowed out and infected the Olympians, Zeus in particular. The king of the gods went from confident about killing Ares to fearful of the monster in Kratos, leading to all of the events in the latter 2 games. It explains the contradictory nature of Zeus, one that likely stuck out in the players' heads as they continued to play. Athena now wants this gift of hope so that she can guide humanity in a new direction and they can rebuild. But Kratos disagrees, claiming that he owes the goddess nothing. With one final command prompt, Kratos raises the Sword of Olympus into the air and runs it through his own torso. As the Spartan takes his final breaths, Athena expresses her disappointment, lamenting the fact that with Kratos' death, hope will now belong to all of humanity. In her eyes, they won't know what to do with it, but that doesn't matter to Kratos as he lays dying on the ground. And that's the end of the game. I mean, to me, that's a perfect ending. It would be completely silly for Kratos to continue to be this vengeful person after all of the emotion that he just went through. Had it been a standard ending where he defeats Zeus, kills the ghost of Athena, and then sits on top of the remnants of Olympus looking into the camera, I would have thought it was a completely missed opportunity. It took all of those tiny fragments that you very, very rarely saw Kratos exude when he felt bad about something happening because of him and his actions, and then assembles them into one final surge of self-sacrifice that causes a melancholy to wash over the player after all of these emotions of anger and vindication. Of course, there are sequels, but that's a story for another time. The original God of War Trilogy were masterpieces in their time. They were lovingly crafted works of art and a culmination of things that Santa Monica enjoyed as people who respected the medium. The first game came onto the scene and reminded people of what a video game could truly be. If I had to complain about it, I'd say that it's obviously a little dated compared to its predecessors combat-wise, and that you have to really like puzzling in the same environment for the majority of the game. But that would probably be a complaint for complaining's sake. The game is a masterstroke of intricately designed puzzles, fun combat moments, and a deep emotional story that unfolds after a seemingly shallow start about an angry man. God of War 2 follows this up nicely, showing Kratos go from top to bottom to top again. The combat is improved, the environments expanded on. That said, this was the one that I still have the most complaints about. The puzzles tending to almost be weird detours that suddenly relate to moving on to the next detour after solving them. Yes, the whole thing seems to be more about regaining your power so that you can face Zeus, but feels a little stupid when you just fly to the last island after just doing stuff. Add that to the time travel issues and well, it's just inferior in terms of story to either of the other games. And the lack of emotional backdrop after the stellar outing in the first game makes it hard to get connected the same way as God of War 1. But all of it can just be viewed as a 6 to 8 hour setup for the final entry. And it does do that well, the ending really hammering home this epic clash that's about to take place after waiting for so long. And God of War 3, well, much like Red Dead Redemption 2 for me, the game misses the mark in quite a few ways. The puzzles were very straightforward and almost absent when compared to its predecessors, instead opting for long bouts of combat that eventually led to boss fights or cutscenes. But just like Red Dead 2, the story and amazing scenes that do follow are impeccable, easily making up for any issue that I have with the game. The boss fights are nearly all extravagant and over the top, really making you feel immersed in nearly every single one of them, even when they're gimmick fights. This was the only game of the trilogy where I actively had to pull myself away from the game to do other things in real life. I wanted to keep playing and playing, almost every part of the journey causing me to get excited for what was going to happen next. And the ending did exactly what I said the devs could have done with the first game, making it all worth it. I'm telling you right now, and this might be biased because of my age, but 2010 was one of the best years that we've ever seen in gaming, and God of War 3 was a big part of that legacy. This entire trilogy was absolutely as good as I remember, that's not even a question. The fact that Santa Monica Studios went on to top this storytelling from 2018 onward is a testament to the love that they put into fleshing out Kratos' story. I know it's easy to get bogged down in the bullshit that people have to deal with concerning many of the new releases that are haphazardly thrown at audiences nowadays. But there are developers out there who are doing it right and have been doing it right since the beginning, and this series stands the test of time and continues to impress. Thanks for watching. I honestly don't know if I'll ever cover the newer God of War games because I know I love them. It's really hard to make a video about something that you unequivocally love because a lot of it turns into gushing instead of taking a harder look at the game's flaws. It's why I haven't made any videos about FromSoft games. But I don't know, maybe one day. Until then, I have merch over at my merch shop. None of it has to do with God of War, but all of it has to do with supporting my goddamn channel through t-shirt and accessory purchases. I also have a Twitch where, well, I've been on hiatus due to basement flooding, but we should be getting that flooring put in here soon since that all died. I have a Twitter where I usually just send out my videos when they're ready. I have a Discord where people yell at each other in lowercase and converse calmly in uppercase. And I have a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.